compensation law.
Yeah.
Of life.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, look, actually in all of these videos, what I am actually trying to do is to bring to the people my findings regarding what I would call a law, a universal law, or a law that actually cuts right through the physical and the psychological, or we would say is a law that is psychophysical, and that most laws are either psychological or physical, and we have like very little knowledge of the way the two connect. But actually all my work revolves around the discovery of a law which has bearing on both areas, and how this law or this mechanism plays itself out in our lives. And why do I try to bring this in such a medium as the internet or on the YouTube, or is because mostly science has always been accused of living in an ivory tower, meaning that a lot of what science does, it isn't seen often as directly relevant to the small man and woman in society. But this law, this mechanism that I am trying to explain, has bearing on everybody's life. And it's so important because if we don't understand the workings of this law, we're going to self-destruct. That's why I keep trying to, in ever more simple terms, trying to bring this to the attention of the people. And I'm very aware of the fact that it's very important to bring this in a very simple way, you know, and maybe you can help me in pinning me down to explaining this in a very simple way with simple examples today.
Okay, so compensation law, what does it mean exactly?
Yeah, look, the compensation law is actually...
Well, what's compensated?
Right. It's based on the idea that there's a force in our life that will tend to correct us or to compensate us when we are functioning in a too one-sided fashion. And in psychology, we talk about it in terms of the shadow. The shadow would be the side of you that you tend to neglect, tend not to listen to, but that will appear in your life in terms of trying to compensate you for the being too much into the opposite side of that shadow. So it basically boils down to a problem of honesty with ourselves and the ability that we have to be very self-deceptive and to fool ourselves. And in that sense, this compensation law is a force that will try to keep us honest in a way and to balance or to compensate our dishonesty or our one-sidedness.
So you're saying that actually we are lying to ourselves?
Yes.
Like in what way?
Well, we're constantly doing that. You see, the ego construct tends to isolate itself and to build a kind of a protective wall around itself in order to never threaten itself. So the ego, for instance, would be lying about certain things, but the ego will tend to build that protective wall. For instance, anytime anyone comes near to showing you, for instance, things in your own life that are not as you tend to say they are, then the ego will shut that off. So the ego tends to be to censor any information that would show it its areas, its darker areas that it does not want to admit or see itself.
Like how exactly
Well, for
would that
instance,
happen?
well, it could happen in any amount of ways. Take, for instance, if you are by day being very arrogant and insultative towards others, or putting others down, you're not going to see that you're doing that. You know, the ego will protect itself against seeing that you're actually being very destructive towards others. So what happens then is the first signal of that compensation mechanism, which would be a signal to try to show you that you're being way too arrogant, you would shut that off. For instance, you would get that someone would actually, for instance, have slips of the tongue, in which quite the contrary would be expressed than they would be trying to express. For instance, showing insecurity and weakness in the person, him or herself. But you would like quickly try to cover up that slip and not regard it. And then you would have that and when you achieve to not pay attention to that, then for instance that same person would have a dream in which this person would be exposed to that behavior, so for instance the person would dream of climbing up on something too high to get back down, as a means of showing the person, him or herself, showing themselves that they are being extremely one-sided or offbeat.
The dream says that.
Yes. That's like the second line of attack. And then of course the person would achieve to not want to remember their dreams or not want to see what it's really being. And of course, for instance, the person would turn that into something positive to the side that is being arrogant. And in that way, the person achieves to insulate him or herself off against that compensatory or that feedback that they are being what they are being. You see, and this law, this mechanism, will constantly keep trying to show you that you're being destructive, and thus not wanting to see that, trying to keep you honest. And the ego would achieve to keep running from that message.